Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into the fascinating 1,000-year history of Ukrainian money. As you'll see, the cash in your pocket is actually much more than just a means of exchange. It is a seriously powerful tool of statecraft and identity.
So let's actually kick things off with a pretty recent headline. Back on September 2nd, 2024, the National Bank of Ukraine made a pretty bold proposition, dropping the widely used word kopek in favor of a historic coin called the sha. Their stated goal? To revive national traditions and distance the country's currency from external influences.
To really grasp exactly why this matters today, we're going to trace the turbulent but completely unbroken lineage of Ukraine's currency across 6 distinct eras. We'll cover dropping the kopek, origins in Kyivan Rus, the birch bark ledgers, art of the revolution, underground notes and hyperinflation, and finally, the modern hryvnia.
All right, let's jump right into part 1, dropping the kopek.
Let's unpack the actual ideological weight behind these two words. You see, the National Bank of Ukraine views the kopek, which, by the way, comes from the Russian word kopyo, meaning spear, named after a Russian writer depicted holding a spear, as this lingering symbol of Moscow's occupation. On the flip side, we have the sha. This is a historic coin unit from the 17th century that was roughly equal to 2 Russian kopecks. It's deeply embedded in local history, even famously showing up in the poetry of Taras Shevchenko.
To truly appreciate this pursuit of monetary identity, we need to go way back. This is Section 2, Origins in Kyivan Rus, covering the 8th to 9th centuries. Now, what is super interesting here is how the word hryvnia actually originated. Back in the 8th and 9th centuries, Kyivan Rus was this massive trading hub, right? But here's the kicker. They didn't actually have minted coins of their own. Instead, they used the hryvnia. Derived from the Old Slavic word for neck or mane, a hryvnia originally wasn't even a coin at all. It was literally a heavy gold or silver neck ring that wealthy people wore just to visibly flex their status and riches.
Over time, as trade really started booming, these wearable hryvnias actually evolved into standardized units of commerce. We're talking 150 to 200 gram solid silver ingots cast in clay. And they weren't all the same either. They came in very distinct regional shapes. You had the Kyivan Hryvnia, which was this neat hexagonal rhombus, the Chernihiv Hryvnia, which had these intentionally flattened ends just to prove the purity of the silver inside, and the Novgorod Hryvnia, which basically looked like an elongated metal stick.
And to really put their immense purchasing power into perspective, let's look at Yaroslav the Wise's famous Ruska Pravda laws from the 11th century. You could buy a top-tier prized warhorse for just 4 or 5 hryvnias. Meanwhile, crimes were literally paid off with these same exact ingots. Stealing a horse? That's a 3 hryvnia fine. Murder? That carried a massive, life-altering fine of up to 80 hryvnias. That is a lot of silver.
But that begs the question, how on earth did everyday people buy something simple like a loaf of bread? Well, that brings us to Section 3, the birch bark ledgers, where we solve a historical mystery.
Obviously, walking around with a 200-gram silver ingot to buy groceries just isn't practical, so people used fractions of a hryvnia for small trade. But here's where it gets really confusing. Historical legal texts, specifically one known as the Short Truth, showed some serious mathematical discrepancies in how these fractions were calculated compared to later editions. This literally sparked decades-long intense debates between prominent scholars like Vasily Klushevsky and Valentin Yanin. It was like a giant historical math puzzle.
Basically, historians had to decode these standard exchange rates from the 11th century. The accepted math was that 1 hryvnia equaled 20 nogadas, 25 kunas, or 50 rizanas. But in later texts, fines that were previously listed in rizanas were suddenly listed in kunas. Scholars debated this endlessly. Did changing global silver prices cause the kuna and rizana to just merge? Or did the kuna lose half its value? It was an absolute medieval accounting headache.
Well, the mystery was finally solved, and not by some theoretical model, but by literal medieval trash. Birch bark documents excavated in Novgorod, specifically gramadas number 238 and 320, acted as actual physical receipts. They conclusively proved that the kuna and rizana didn't merge at all. Nope. They were entirely distinct units used side by side in the very same transactions well into the 14th century, with 1 kuna mathematically equaling exactly 2 rizanas. So problem solved by ancient bookkeeping.
Let's fast forward a few centuries to the early 1900s for Section 4, Art of the Revolution, where money literally becomes a canvas. Between 1917 and 1921, the territory that makes up modern Ukraine experienced an absolute whiplash of leadership. Because governments were shifting so rapidly, an incredible 24 different paper notes were issued in just a few short years. The currency bounced wildly, from the Ukrainian People's Republic Banknotes to Pavlo Skoropadsky's Hryvnia, and then right back again under the Directorate. It was a totally chaotic era, but honestly, visually stunning.
The real standout of this era is the 100 Banknotes note. It was designed by a brilliant 34-year-old graphic artist named Kyivan Rus. Now, he didn't just draw some pretty pictures, he used the currency to forge a national identity. He famously reintroduced the ancient trizoup, or trident symbol from the days of Vladimir the Great. And, crucially, to unite a super diverse population, he printed the text in 4 different languages: Ukrainian, Russian, Polish, and Yiddish. Later versions even pioneered early security features, like a Bogdan Khmelnytsky watermark, a real game-changer.
But what happens when the state basically collapses, or the economy just spirals completely out of control? Let's get into Section 5, Underground Notes and Hyperinflation.
During the struggle of the mid-20th century, formal state currency definitely wasn't the only money changing hands. The underground resistance, specifically the OUN-UPA, used something called bouffons. These were basically one-sided monetary documents or rebel receipts handed out in exchange for supplies. Graphic artists, like Nil Kosevich, actually designed over 500 types of these underground notes to fund their operations right under the noses of occupying forces. Incredible, right?
Then, skip ahead to the collapse of the Soviet Union and the restoration of independence. Ukraine introduced this temporary currency, the Kyivan Rus, and wow, the transition was incredibly painful. It led to severe hyperinflation. Prices skyrocketed so fast that by 1995, every single Ukrainian was technically a millionaire. I mean, people were literally carrying around massive 1 million denomination notes just to buy basic everyday goods.
Thankfully, that economic chaos didn't last forever. Which brings us to our final section, Section 6, the modern hryvnia and stabilization.
Historian Alexander Alforov really hits the nail on the head regarding the journey we've just been on. He says money performs not only a financial but also an ideological function. A perfect example of this in action is the 10 hryvnia note. By placing the 18th century leader Ivan Mazepa right on the bill, the currency actively helped rehabilitate his image. It shifted him away from the old Russian imperial narrative of a traitor, firmly cementing him as a celebrated national figure in the public eye.
So, the modern hryvnia was officially rolled out in 1996, finally giving Ukraine the stable currency it desperately needed. Interestingly, though, because domestic facilities just weren't ready yet, the very first banknotes were actually printed over in Canada and the UK, while the metal kopecks were minted in Luhansk and Italy. As the currency matured, the government sometimes played it a bit politically safe. For instance, the 1,000 hryvnia note, released in 2019, features the brilliant scientist Volodymyr Vernadsky, intentionally sidestepping more controversial political or military figures.
Which brings us to the end of this journey and leaves us looking toward the future. As the economy evolves, there's talk of potential 2,000 or even 5,000 hryvnia notes down the line. Historians suggest they might feature cultural icons, maybe the legendary opera singer Solomia Krushenitska, or the pioneering filmmaker Oleksandr Dovzhenko. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a question. After 1,000 years of silver ingots, rebel receipts, and hyperinflated millions, who or what do you think should represent the very next era of national identity on the currency of tomorrow?